Welcome, fellow ski and boarding enthusiasts, to Fresh Corduroy, the podcast that explores topics of interest to skiers and snowboarders with other skiers and snowboarders. I'm your host, Craig Zolan, and I'm thrilled to be your guide. This week's episode is with Tommy Biesemeyer. Tommy spent 12 years on the U.S. ski team and was a member of the U.S. Olympic team in 2018 at Pyeongchang. He was the U.S. downhill national champion in 2021. He is currently the Executive Director of World Cup Dreams Foundation and the Director of Alpine Skiing at Northwood School, a prep school located in Lake Placid, New York. We talk at length with Tommy about the financial realities of ski racing and how World Cup Dreams is working to lessen the burden on rising talent. We also touch on his coaching philosophy with aspiring junior racers at Northwood and the viability of the NCAA pathway to World Cup success. Now let's go get some fresh corduroy with Tommy Biesemeyer. Tommy, thank you very much for joining Fresh Corduroy Podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Craig.
My pleasure. So let's talk a little bit about the Tommy origin story. Like, when did you get started skiing? Where, etc.
Yeah, I grew up from a place referred to as Out There in Keene, New York, which is a small little town in the Adirondacks, just south of Lake Placid. And I got into the local ski program mainly because of lack of nothing else to do. I was a competitive little kid with not a lot of opportunity to play organized sports, and that was my passion. And so my parents were, I was fortunate enough for my parents to recognize that, and they put me into the local ski program at NICEF, and I did alpine skiing, ski jumping, and cross country skiing. And when I was like 12, my ski jumping coach at the time said, "Tommy, fat doesn't fly." And I was like a porky little kid, and but so it turns out like a big bone 12-year-old was better at going downhill than flying through the air. And my passion was alpine skiing anyway, so it all worked out, and I just went in that direction. And I was a good skier for whatever reason. You know, I just had that touch, and that touch led to winning states at the U14, U16, and then U18 nationals, and then making the USD team when I graduated high school. And that was a 12-year career and representing the U.S. at the 2018 Olympics and the 2 World Championship teams, and being the number 1 ranked Super G skier for the U.S. for a couple of years. So I've had a great run. And it just, when I look back on it and reflect on that career, it was a product of just determination, competitiveness, and being competitive, or just being fortunate to be good at skiing for whatever reason that was, because I didn't come from a family of skiers.
Yeah. You mentioned you didn't have a lot of opportunity to participate in other sports. I mean, I do know that the area is pretty remote. So I'm guessing that's because there wasn't enough people to field a baseball team, or
That's a good question. And to put some perspective on that, in 7th grade, I played varsity baseball because they needed a ninth. So that just goes to illustrate the size of participation numbers.
Got it. One of the things that people talk about is, I'll call it, cross training and playing, particularly in youth sports, playing a lot of different sports, so you don't get burnt out in one particular, sport that you're focusing on. But so it sounds like you did have that, at least in winter sports with ski jumping, cross country. Did you participate in, baseball? Did you participate in any summer or fall activities?
Yeah, I would play on the soccer team. I played on the baseball team. I played basketball too in the winter. When I didn't have ski practice, I would go to basketball practice. So it was very hit or miss on my attendance. And then the summer I played tennis. To say I played competitive tennis would be slightly misleading, but I mean, I would show up every day and play with whoever would play with me. And I think that consistency led to being able to play tennis relatively well.
Yeah. When did you know that alpine skiing was the thing that you wanted to pursue, um, not necessarily exclusively, but to a higher degree.
I think when I was like 12, it sort of presented itself as
Yeah,
that was what I was best at, and I was having the most success at, and I had a clear runway. In the sense, we had good coaching, great access to a mountain, and family support to do it. So,
yeah.
and talent.
So having whiteface in your backyard, so to speak, was a key determiner of like which sport you were pursuing, and in terms of the fact that it was there. You said a clear runway, but were you did you feel the passion, like the drive, like that's what I want to do? There were, you know,
Yeah, I think, yeah, like I had a connection to the sport. I loved it. It's where all my friends were. And so, and then whiteface, if I had a backyard that was the equivalent of Buck Hill, like a little rope tow, is it safe to say the outcome would have been the same? Maybe. It's hard to say that, but I just really liked the camaraderie and uh, the ability to ski and train. I think for me, I just loved to train. I loved racing the clock. That was just like I loved, I loved going and having timing set up and trying to just improve on my time. It was just like the easiest and most transactional way to spend my time, which is funny now being 36. Very, I'm very simple when it comes to amusement. Like it doesn't take much to sort of stay focused if it's sort of black and white as that.
yeah. I know what you're describing because I did the same thing when I was young, in terms of trying to shave a 100th or a 10th off each run in training. It was a lot of fun. So your career was beset by a few injuries. Imagine that that's not easy to come back from, but you clearly had the drive to continue to pursue it. Were there other challenges um, in terms of continuing to pursue it at the highest level during your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. And injury definitely was my Achilles heel in terms of like development and reaching my true potential when I think about my sort of career today, looking back on it. But also, I struggled with the pressure of performing, like because of the expectations I had around me from coaches and myself. Like I was talented and I was fast and um I showed that at the highest level. So I had this expectation to win, or just perform, wanted to win a World Cup, win Olympic medal. And I felt like that was my motivation for my goals because I knew I could do it. Um, and then on race day, I struggled to sort of let go and be free and ski relaxed. And that was something, coming back from injury has its own struggles. And I think it's important to sort of differentiate between coming back from injury and then just competing. Um, when you're in it, when you're ready and you've had the proper preparation. And if I was to just look at the proper preparation and, there's no excuses, um, there was always something that held me back on race day. And that's something that I struggled with other than just feeling like I just got injured.
Do you think that would be the same today? There seems to be today a lot more talk about mental health broadly, but like, the mental skills side of competition. I think it's, one, people talk about training those things. It doesn't come innately to folks. So given the greater focus today on those aspects, do you think, if we knew now, if you knew then what we know now, would things be perhaps different? Or would you have at least participated in some of those, mental skills training exercises?
Yeah, I mean, I think like now, I mean, it seems to be cool and acceptable to be vulnerable. So like, I think people have, used that as like a safe place to expose kind of what they're feeling and what they're thinking and what they're struggling with. And so if I were to go back 10 years, 15 years, which is crazy to think back that far and where I was in a place where I was competing.
Wait till you
Um,
get to my age.
right. Yeah, exactly. Um, would I have been vulnerable? Um, yeah, for sure. It was always, I feel like even to this day, I say what's on my mind and I say what I think. And I've never been shy to not do that. And so I think at that time, I, I just didn't know that you should do that. I thought like you just sort of kept it inside and you just sort of you showed your strengths to the outside. And then like inwardly, you wrestled with the beast.
Yeah, I think it's both an awareness of the by the athletes today, but I think there's also more awareness by coaches as well, right? I mean, I imagine I've been coached, I was coached, I've coached. You're just like suck it up, go ski, or like,
Yeah.
there's less attention. There was less attention to the mental side of sport, a decade ago or longer. Whereas today, I think people are coaching staffs are more attuned to it and understand. Um, and I think there's varying degrees of skill. So you mentioned you didn't know to express yourself, but it's also a question, whether or not the coaching staffs at the time were attuned to understanding the mental challenges that athletes face.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, it's, the athlete is responsible for their outcome and, addressing their weak points is critical. But I also think in ski racing today, the coaching could be a little maybe more professionalized in the sense that like instead of waiting waiting to for an athlete to open up, it doesn't take a lot to recognize that this athlete is struggling and they're not reaching their potential. So instead of waiting for this breakthrough or this recognition on their part, I'm going to start coaching to get the best out of them because I believe in them. And I think that's something that I do now, working with kids and with just a team around me is like, I treat people the way that I wish I had been treated. And because you can push kids, however way you want to sort of position them
Yep.
in your world, to get the best out of them. Because if you do that, they'll do the same for you. And so, I can sit here and talk about what happened in the past, but like really, I have like a very sort of low tolerance for that because it's such a waste of time. And it's if you sit there and think about what you wish you should have done or could have done to improve your career as a professional skier, like it's good to recognize that. But for right now, I just don't want to make those mistakes again.
Yeah.
So
So you mentioned, you're working with kids today. So I assume in your role as the director of alpine skiing at Northwood, you're working with, teenagers, younger teenagers, I guess, given the age range of, a freshman to high school, generally speaking. Obviously, they must look up to you in the sense that here's, someone who came from, around the corner and made it onto the World Cup stage. Um, do you use a lot of your life lessons from skiing, from training, et cetera, in terms of your coaching style today? How does that work from a educational standpoint?
I try to keep my career out of it.
Uh-huh.
And I try to look at every kid as if I try to create a relationship with each kid. And I think it's kind of lame to give like a blanket approach. It's like, you're going to work hard and you're going to, reach your goals and hard work pays off. Like, just like give some sort of rah rah, pom pom speech. I try to like get to know the kid and really understand what they're all about. And, and then when they start to slip, whether it's academically or athletically or socially, you have a pretty good sense of why, if you get to know them. And so my style is to sort of get a pretty good read on someone. And then when I think that I can be value add, then I just try to connect with them and let them know that I know without having to like ask them, why are you getting bad grades? It's like, why haven't you finished a race in a month? Why are you not showing up to training? Or why are you being such a jerk to everyone around you? It's like whatever it may be, and just sort of let them realize that I'm recognizing it needs to stop, and we can improve. And try to weave in a little bit like, what can I do? What are you not getting? What can I do to help you? And where's the ownership from you to start digging yourself out
Yep. Uh,
or
A,
climbing your way out?
right. A, I wish my son had you around. Sounds like it would have benefited him a bit. The B, well, and I'm going to sort of segue to, the other half of your professional career today is some of them probably have, and the pun intended, World Cup dreams.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, right? A very select few will ultimately make it, to the U.S. ski team and ultimately, ski on the World Cup. How do you manage those expectations, across the skier population that you're working with? I mean, and I understand
Yes.
performance growth will not move in a linear fashion, right? So, some years they'll develop significantly, and other years they may have a plateau or a challenge.
That's a good question. So, like, I mean, you referenced a World Cup dream, and I, as you stated, I am the director of skiing at Northwood School, and I also am the executive director of World Cup Dreams Foundation. So, I don't know if you want to sort of just get into that, or you want to sort of wait to dive into that, because I can answer the question from both
Yeah,
views.
go however you want to answer it.
Um, and since we're talking about Northwood, the talking about Northwood, the expectations there. So we have 50 kids on the Northwood ski team, and that's between alpine, freestyle, ski jumping, and cross country skiing. Um, Interestingly to me is that there's probably two kids out of 50 that have the U.S. ski team on their goal sheet
Uh-huh.
or have a World Cup dreams. Um, and then the rest, a majority of them want to ski in college, and or some of them just want to go to college and maybe ski. So it goes to my point about understanding each kid on the team. And so how do you manage the expectations of skiing Division 1, which seems to be the general goal? Like if you were to categorize where the majority of these kids want to go, they want to ski Division 1. And that's similar in the sense that it's a lofty goal, and it's challenging to reach it. But who am I to say that that's like an outrageous thing to work towards? And you then hold them accountable for however many years they're in your program of like, hey, you got to arc the top of the turn. You have to be the front of the boot. You have to have a sense of urgency when you compete, and you definitely can't be like sulking in the corner for days on end if you don't perform, because all of those things, if you do them, uh, you won't reach your goal. So like I think managing expectations is just letting them understand that, okay, you want to see Division 1, you're going to have 30, 40 points, like realistically, just points. So let them know that, and I think I oftentimes hear people like just not say the facts. And so it's like, okay, you want this goal, we're going to have to give you a true shot across the board, 30 points, 40, 50, 60 points. You're going to start getting your name in the hat. You're going to have discussion, but it's going to become increasingly more difficult. That's the prerequisite. Um, then you're gonna have to get good grades, and then you're also just gonna have to have some good character, because there's going to be other kids that are going to fit the same sort of metrics that you're going to show in terms of fist points and grades. And so I think you just, instead of saying, that's a big goal, it's okay, this is what we're going to have to do to achieve it. And that's like from the Northwood side of things, in a very long-winded way. It's you just treat them as if you give them all the attention and the respect around that goal. And usually those expectations become more clear as time goes on, and everyone sort of knows the sort of where it's going to go without having to sort of be the bad news bear.
Yeah. Um, why don't you talk about it from a World Cup Dreams Foundation perspective? Because
World Cup Dreams
yeah,
Foundation perspective is, our position there is to support athletes who illustrate potential and financial need at a national level. So our goal there is a little bit different. And, my strategy at Northwood of like getting to know kids individually, um, is different with my strategy at World Cup Dreams, because the strategy there is you're trying to run an organization that fulfills its mission of supporting the nation's best rising and top level athletes with financial and mentorship, and then selecting athletes that fit that to keep them in the sport. So you're not really working with the athletes at a personal level. You're looking at it more, um, from the perspective of like, okay, we need to like grow a talent pool. So it's more strategic and it's a little bit more sort of general in terms of the kids, but there it's you're giving them the resources they need to continue on their journey. It's getting their 50 days of on snow training in the summer, going to all the races. They qualify for U18 nationals, they can go. They make US nationals, they can buy the flights, pay the overweight baggage, pay the entry fee, pay the hotel bill, and compete and then if they continue to sort of do everything that they're supposed to do and check all the boxes that you can control, um, then they should develop because they are at a certain level in their sport. And the only thing holding them back is financial need and then a little bit of mentorship where we pair them up with alumni of the foundation who have reached a World Cup, Olympic, or World Championship level to share some insight. So you're trying to double end the deal other than just getting money and just getting a little bit of uh, hoorah
Right.
behind it.
There's a lot to unpack there. Skiing is not an inexpensive sport, right? It costs money to ski race. Everything from equipment to training to travel to race entry fees, etc. And it sounds like that cost challenge begins at a fairly early age. You're talking about the U16 or U18s, up through the World Cup level. I might start with the top level and work our way back. I know that basically you get a phone call from the U.S. ski team and say, hey, you've been nominated. Now write us a check. I don't know if that's the way it is still.
Anyway, yeah, I'll let you finish.
No. Basically, so let's talk about like even for people who have reached that level, and perhaps even more, they're on the team and they're competing at the World Cup, but they aren't, Michaela Schifrin, they aren't Lindsey Vonn or someone who has, that many World Cup wins under their belt. It's still not inexpensive. It's not like they're making a ton of money. So let's talk it like there and like what are the economic realities of skiers at that level, and kind of we'll work our way backwards.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think if you look at alpine skiing as an example, as a pyramid, we start at the top of the pyramid, and those are your elite level athletes, D through the A team. But really, sort of, if you're talking about financial stability, then you're looking from the development team. Well, the ski team did away with the development team, so let's say D through B team, and that's a grind. It's development team. I think you have a team fee of $10,000, so you are paying the ski team $10,000 check to have a place on the team, and then your C and B team members are fully funded, but ability to make money is limited. So you get to say that you're a professional athlete, but you're not financially rewarded for that until you become top 25 in the world. So that is, at World Cup Dreams, our position is to help those development years where you are slogging it out, at NORAMs, Europa Cups. You get your World Cup start, you do a couple, doesn't go well, you get kicked back down to the Europa Cup NORAM level. You gain some momentum there, and you're just trying to develop, and that takes a couple years. And you're living in Park City, and so you are incurring some expenses that are fixed in regards to what you're supposed to be doing. And so how do you afford that, and while being independent of your parents at the age of 21 to 26 years old? It's sometimes it's embarrassing that you are sort of codependent on your parents to survive while being a professional athlete. So our goal is to help that and just sort of legitimize their their goals and their position and what they've been able to accomplish up until this point.
Right. So sort of shed some light on the less glamorous side of, getting the jacket, as some people would say, making the team, is that it's, financially difficult for them to subsist, right? Whether it's, rent for an apartment or food during the summertime or what have you. They need to find other, sources of income or funds in order to continue on their dream. It's interesting, the Lauren Masuga, who, won bronze at the World Championships, has a question mark taped to her helmet, right? Because she's presumably looking for a helmet sponsor. Yeah, headgear sponsor. Goes to show that, just making the team or even having some, a win under your belt doesn't, sort of bring the sponsors running to you. It takes
I think Lauren Masuga is a good example of someone that is now financially stable, and she's come onto the scene quickly, and now she's in a position where she's, being able to leverage her marketability and her success. And so her question mark on her helmet, she's probably asking for a significant amount. And so that, like, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would sponsor her, but she's holding out for the right partner. So for her, I don't think I wouldn't look at it as dire. I would look at it as being selective.
Got it. Okay. Let's talk about, I may as well talk about some of the other sort of World Cup skiers that are World Cup Dreams Foundation recipients. I think Nina O'Brien, Trisha Mangan.
Well,
right?
To go through that list, let me see if I have it here. Yeah, here we go. We got some kids here. You look at a guy like Isaiah Nelson that we support. And Isaiah Nelson is a kid who won the Norm overall title, gave him a fixed World Cup spot in all events the following year. He executed on that. I think it was last season, was his first year full World Cup. And he scored World Cup points once, which was great. But it wasn't enough to be top 30 and to sort of have a place on the World Cup tour. He has to continue to bounce back to Continental Cup to sort of confirm this point profile so he protects his starting point in World Cup. So he's going back and forth. He's playing a game. And the risk of going all in on a World Cup means that if he doesn't succeed of being top 30 at the end of the year or scoring fifth points, then he's caught in no man's land is a horrible spot. You have the talent, but you don't have the fist points to benefit from a good starting point to actually be successful. So right now, my thought on Isaiah Nelson specifically is it's going to take a few years, and it's going to be tough for him financially because he's going to be, he's going to come in the spotlight and he's going to leave the spotlight, and so his value to a company to support him in a meaningful way is just not there.
Yep.
And so what happens to a guy like that? What does he do? Does he get a job in the summer? Or do you support him and give him some breathing room so he doesn't feel squeezed financially? And that's a good example of someone that we support today. Trisha Mangan is another athlete in the same situation. She fought her way back onto the team. She's scoring World Cup points sort of every other race she does, but they're not enough points to get her in the top 30. So we're just going to continue to support her until she can break through. Sam Morse is an athlete that we support, and he just sort of flirts with the top 30 all the time. He ended last year at 31, 32 in the world. Great accomplishment, but that doesn't pay. So, and then we have young guys like Stanley Busick, who gets fifth at World Junior Slalom. Great accomplishment, but not a lot of people probably know that. And here he is trying to earn his stripes and getting onto the World Cup Slalom Tour, which is a grind. And it's going to take a few years. So we're going to support it.
He's a much younger guy. What is he, at 05, if I remember correctly? And yeah, so he's got a number of years under. So let's talk about, there's a cost and a grind, and you mentioned sort of this sort of dovetails back with Northwood, and a lot of kids have a dream of racing on the NCAA circuit. Like that's kind of what they view as the next step. Do you view that as a viable pathway to Europa Cup success and ultimately World Cup success? Like, because, we can talk about the financial implications of that as well, but like, let's talk about it. Is it viable to go that route as opposed to Stanley, who I don't believe is, enrolling in college. He's going the sort of the dedicated U.S. team route.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and to say otherwise would be a mistake because there are so many examples of athletes who have used the NCAA system to buy themselves 4 years and they reinvent themselves with their career. The unfortunate thing is that it happens more frequently with um, international students that take advantage of it. And Americans just are a little bit, they have a harder time sort of doing it just because it's just hard to race in college because it's a really competitive environment. But if you just look at the NCAA system and what that provides from development, coaching, race opportunities, it's all there. And it almost oftentimes what I've seen is that it relaxes athletes because they have to focus on school. And so if they going to school is enough of a distraction where it just allows them to free up and ski and all of a sudden they start to just style.
Yep. So, some of your World Cup Dreams Foundation athletes were former NCAA skiers. It's Nina O'Brien at Dartmouth. I think Trisha was also at Dartmouth, if I remember. I mean, there's a few. Dartmouth seems to be the one that sort of.
Eric Arvidsson skied all
Yeah.
4 years at Middlebury
Yep.
and jumped back onto the team. You have Sam Pratt, who skied at Utah all 4 years and came back. One of our athletes now, Dasha Romanoff, and what's her name? She's good skier. Let's see her. Ava Jemison Sunshine. She's at the University of Utah. The both of them are there and they're taking classes. So, I mean, they're not skiing for them. They're just going to school. But there are a lot of examples of kids who are in school while also skiing for their school and racing for the national team. But it becomes, but if you're going to be a speed skier, that's a hard, you can't do that. So it only works with tech skiers.
That makes sense. So in terms of sort of working our way backwards, right down through the ranks, some of the other things that World Cup Dreams Foundation does is provide grants to U18 and U16 athletes as well. I mean, are you finding that cost is a limiting factor for certain athletes in terms of being able to continue with the sport or continue at the level they need to in order to continue to progress?
Yeah. So like if you were to before we work our way down, and if you just look at the World Championship Team USA World Championship team, there were 10 women named and I believe 12 men named. 10 out of the 12 men were former or current World Cup Dreams athletes, and 6 out of the 10 women were former or current World Cup Dreams athletes. And if you look at who those athletes are, AJ Hurt, her dad was a ski patroller. Ryan Carpenter-Siegel, mom was a ski coach. And a lot of the kids that we support are the offspring of their parents are a ski patroller, a ski coach, or a small business owner in a ski town. And so they've gained access to skiing in their backyard. And because the cost of sport is what it is today, there's no denying it and there's no way around it. They are immediately threatened to be able to continue on this path. So our nation's talent pool is for the ones that are truly on a trajectory to make it to the national team in general are kids that grow up in small towns and small mountain towns, and their parents have gotten a family ski pass because they're a coach, a ski patroller, an industry worker, or a small business owner in the community. And if you don't have if your family income is below, or 200,000, which is a lot of money, you're gonna have a hard time paying for your kids ski racing at $40,000 to $50,000 a year, which is just what it costs. You have equipment, you have your summer camp training, you have race entry fees, you have to travel to races. Qualifying for U18 nationals this year is $3,000 as an entry fee. That doesn't include airfare. So um, it's wild, And if you look at just the price of a lift ticket, and if you just scale that across the sport, every other touch point that happens in the sport, it just goes to show you it's a very expensive sport, and um, we need to protect those athletes because they represent who our best athletes are today on the U.S. ski team. And so our goal at World Cup Dream Foundation is to support them all the way down to U16 to ensure they stay in the sport. They continue to stay in the sport.
Is any of your work focused on finding ways of bringing the cost down, or is it purely just supporting them financially in that regard? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and um, if you look at trying to keep the costs low, how do you do that? Well, if you're going to go train in Sauce Bay, you have your plane costs like fixed. You have your cost to stay in the hotel room pretty fixed. The lane space and ticket fee is it's actually minimal compared to everything else. And then you have your coaching fees, which, so like that's a big one where Ski Club Velo is, I think, $25,000 a year to be a FIS athlete. And those club fees, club dues, are what sustain the operating costs for that club. And so if you want good coaching, then you're going to have to pay good coaches. So, and the problem that we have today is that each club is creating a cost structure because they want the best club, so you want the best U18 coach, men and women. So there's two coaches there. We want the best U16 coach. You want the best amenities. So it's just expensive and you have to pay people a livable wage to exist in Vail or to exist in Jackson Hole, to exist in Park City, to exist here in Lake Placid. So it's a good question, and it's before you start wrestling with that idea and saying that, yeah, we're going to make the sport cheaper, I think the first question that I would ask is, how much should it cost? And then you can start saying, okay, you don't need to ski 70 days in the summer. You really just need to ski 35 days. So like, if you're going to develop in the sport, maybe it's just understanding like there is a baseline price point here. If you're exceeding that, then you should be sort of questioning how you're allocating your resources towards your annual budget.
right.
Anyways.
All right. So you've convinced me that we can't, reframe the entire ski industry and bring costs down. You provide funding. Are there other revenue sources? So, I mean, in part of this is you ask people for money ultimately to contribute to the foundation. What do you say to them in terms of like, how do you get them to write a check? Right. You ask them something to write you a check. That's part of it. And then the question would be, are there other, revenue opportunities to, basically finance this for the top level athletes?
So, it's a good question. How do you raise money without getting on your hands and knees and begging and just making the hard ask? And how do you convince them? Well, you first, just the first thing I sort of test the waters on is, are you curious to help the sport of ski racing? It's being charitable towards ski racing is helping families who are not rich enough to do it. So it's sort of a unique position in terms of philanthropy. It's like we're paying kids to go ski in Austria or Switzerland in the summer because they can't afford it. We're not curing hunger. So you're getting so that sort of whittles it down to people that are, they know ski racing and they know snow sports, and they want to help kids with the goal, with a dream. And so once you get into a conversation and you find that person, then you understand, okay, so we're trying to grow the nation's talent pool by ensuring that the kids who have potential and financial needs stay in it. Um, and that they start to feel good about that. And your motivation to do this is shared with them. So there's sort of some common ground that you can stand on. And so then I try not to ever ask for how much you can give. They know what we're discussing and their role in the conversation. And oftentimes they'll say, I'm willing to write a $10,000 check to go towards this. And I'm really excited to be a part of it. And so that is, like, I would say, the most fun way to do it, because it's just a conversation. And then other ways of raising money, which is something that I have really enjoyed, is creating events that bring communities together. For example, we do an event in Aspen where we get snowcats that bring us up to Bonnie's, which is a mid-mountain lodge. And if you're familiar with Aspen, Bonnie's is sort of the last few local owned and operated businesses, and it's home cooked meals. And this woman, Bridget, is just an amazing job. And she cooks a Swiss themed dinner, and it's family style, candlelit dinner. We bring in a sommelier from New York. It's very, like, bougie in the sense of the wine we drink and the food we eat. But there's nothing fancy about the table setting. And then everyone gets a headlamp and they do a headlamp ski down. And so, the price point on that is flirting with outrageous. But it's enough where, we're in a community that they're able to do it. And you're just creating an experience that they want to be a part of. And they're going to be charitable. They're going to be charitable towards World Cup Dreams, or they're going to be charitable towards their local school, or like they're going to be philanthropic. So you're competing in a market where charitable contributions are going to be made. So you're just trying to capture your piece of the pie. So if you think that way, it helps you rationalize your position of asking people for money.
So that's how the foundation gets its money, I guess, to alleviate the financial concerns further for some of these athletes. I think of, talked about college as being a pathway that does reduce cost, for them because of coaching and training space, and all those things are paid for by the institution. Are there other pathways that help reduce the cost, or at least offset it? I think of college and all the kids that are getting NIL deals in terms of name, image, likeness. Now, I don't think any of these skiers have 2 million followers on Instagram, but how does, I don't know if you think about that at all, or these kids are thinking about in terms of how do they develop their own personal brand, and how do they leverage that for income, to sustain them.
Yeah, I mean, in college level, it's challenging to create a brand for yourself. If you're going to create an NIL deal for yourself in the sport of skiing, and you have 2,000 followers, that's tough. And so, I don't know of any skier that has actually capitalized on a lucrative NIL deal. So for me to even think entrepreneurial about that and how to go about doing it, I think I think my immediate, if it was me in that position, I immediately go just to the mindset of, like, I'm just going to just focus on working really hard and trying to be successful, because that's the only way there's nothing here to leverage.
Yeah. It would focus the athlete's energy in a path that isn't directly related to improving their ski performance. So I understand the challenges. It's just a function of how do you pay for these things and the like. You touched on earlier that Europeans by and large are taking advantage of the NCAA pathway more so than Americans. Any thoughts in terms of something that I've been sort of somewhat passionate about and written about? But what are your thoughts in terms of do you change the model in terms of, the skiing path, the college pathway, to help facilitate the growth? Because, some of the kids that you're describing, they just need a long runway, right? In other words, they just need more time to continue to develop and progress. And college gives them that to an extent. Any thoughts that you've had, whether it's the age eligibility, difference where they have multiple years to, pursue it prior to entry, or, talk about foreigners. I mean, there's a variety of suggestions out there in terms of changes.
Yeah, I mean, what you're up against is that the college coaches that lead these select teams, and there's what, like 17 Division I programs in the country, so not very many, and all 17 coaches that lead those programs are competitors, and they're incentivized to win. So if you're in their shoes, if I'm in their shoes, like, what do? You take the best athletes because you want to win, because your ego wants it. And if it's financial compensation that you're going to get by winning a national championship, or it's just some good street cred that you're going to get, whatever the reward is of winning a national championship, which doesn't really take a lot to be sort of to understand. You're gonna prioritize recruiting and increasing your chances to make that happen. So, there's a lot of international athletes that see this as a really viable pathway for them to leave their national teams, get a 4-year degree, race collegiately, race the NORAMs, and then maybe go back to their national team. Everyone's benefiting. And so, except for American ski racers who are leaving Proctor or Northwood or Burke or GMDS or Stratton, to name a few, and you have an 18-year-old boy or girl who's just physically not as strong or emotionally as mature as a 23-year-old from Norway who has been racing European Cup. It's just like not a fair fight, and you can't even compare the two. So what do you do? Because if there's no real viable pathway for these American kids who have invested a lot of time and resources to get to this point with no real exit off ramp to skiing college, it's a conundrum. It's tricky, and I think the only way it would work is if they made, the coaches made sort of an alliance, an agreement that we will only have 30% international kids on our team. So if you carry a 10-man, a 10 female team, then 3 can be internationals and the remaining 7 need to be Americans. And that's sort of the accepted, because you can't make rules, I don't think, within the institution that you have to do it that way. I think it just has to be a handshake deal between coaches to protect the pathway for American ski racing into college skiing. I don't know. That's my best shot right now to answer this question.
Yeah. It's not an easy question. I know that there's a task force, that's working on it in terms of proposing, new rules, for NCAA skiing, one of which has to do with the age, eligibility sort of exemption. Ice hockey and skiing are the two that allow you to compete for 3 years post high school without losing any eligibility. Every other sport, with the exception of tennis, which is even shorter, only allows 1 year. So it forces kids that, you talked about not the fair fight between an 18-year-old and a 23-year-old, Norwegian. If you can shorten that gap, i.e. they're 19-year-old Norwegians, not the 23-year-old,
right.
Then maybe it is a fairer fight in terms of the kids entering school, and then college skiing becomes actually collegiate aged athletes as opposed to what it is today. I'm for that. I'm actually less for the restriction on foreign athletes, for a variety of reasons, but it would help. But I think that's just probably more difficult to to get that. You described the understanding among all the coaches. Um, um, in the limited time we have left, are there other things about World Cup Dreams Foundation that we should know about in terms of contributing or other? You mentioned the event at
Yeah.
Bonnie's. It sounds like fun. If only I were there. What?
Yeah, no, I think, one thing that I think is important to note in terms of like, one of the things that I've asked myself and what we've talked about within the board is how do we measure success and what is our 5-year strategic plan? And what's the connection? And so together we have worked with the US ski team to evaluate the data that represents our nation's talent pool. And so over a 20-year time horizon, and that's been really interesting. It's been a fun project to understand where are we today. And so as we allocate to resources to kids who illustrate potential and financial need, like how do we measure the impact that we're trying to make? And so we measure, we've measured potential, excluding sort of World Cup Dreams position on it as just like a nation. And we looked at being top 300 between the ages of 16 and 22 years old as a control. And we see how many kids meet that profile in the US compared to other nations. And so we did that over a 20-year time horizon. And today, our nation is sixth in the world behind Italy, France, Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. Austria and Switzerland being the leaders. I think we have 26 athletes that meet that threshold, and Austria and Switzerland have 78 and 82. So when we backdate that and you look over a 20-year time horizon, the most amount of athletes that we had at top 300 was in 2006. And there is a correlation to that number and the amount of top 30 athletes that we have on the World Cup. And so, Austria and Switzerland have the most, and they have the most at top 30. When we go back to 2006 with 54 being top 300, we had our most at the World Cup level.
Yep.
So if we can invest and grow that number of athletes in the top 300, we will then get more top 30 ranked World Cup skiers. And the conversion rate of being top 300 to becoming top 30 is 5.5 years. So it takes 5.5 years to reach that level, the highest level of the sport. And so that even just strengthens why to continue supporting these athletes and, the Isaiah Nelsons and the Patricia Mangans and the Eric Arvidssons, and the Kyle Niggemers of the world.
Yeah. I love the data analysis. I'm a data guy. That's what I've done for the vast majority of my career. So it's interesting that you're doing that analysis. One of the things that I did recently was looked at skier attrition, or the drop off in the number of competitors and where it peaks for U.S. athletes, and trying to figure out what the cause of that. So interestingly, second year U12 is where the athlete population peaks, and then it starts to fall. And I think some of that is attributable to cost, in terms of at the U14 level, you're starting to get into multiple pairs of skis and more racing, and obviously at U16 again, part of that may be competing with other sports, right? Just your focus lies elsewhere, whether it's a sport or music or some other activity. But digging into what the causation of that is pretty important. I think cost is certainly a contributing factor, and so how to mitigate that, whether it's through World Cup Dreams Foundation or other sort of support mechanisms, I think is helpful, because again, if we just kept the population at the same level, presumably there'd be a larger percentage of them that are at that top 300 level, right? And growing that pie, and continue to expand, our sort of top athlete pool. So how do you get more people into that top 300? Like, is it supporting the U16? I
So
mean, how do you do that?
it's a good question. You look at, kind of break this out of who gets this money and how do you select these kids. And so we created a criterion that would sort of allude to us that they will become top 30 or top 300, sorry. And so you create sort of a framework to identify talent, and then what do they need to actually realize becoming top 300? And if you break that into tangible and intangible needs, tangible is days on snow, good equipment, proper coaching, good, like, enough races, and then training days in the competition season. Then the intangible one is the culture, and sort of the mindset. And so those two sort of places, that's why we give for the tangibles. That's why we give the financial aid, we give the grants, and then our mentorship is really focused on the culture. And so we're really trying to just create gritty, hard charging competitors, and learning that from someone like myself or someone like Jimmy Cochran, Tim Kelly, to name a few, who were former beneficiaries, and they work with these kids. And to say, what, oh, you're coming up to U18 nationals, or you're coming up to your first set of NORAMs. What's holding you back? What are your goals? And maybe you can get a connection there, and maybe a light bulb can go off for these kids where they feel heard, they feel supported, in a way that maybe they're not getting in their current setting. So, it's nice to say, but it's our way of attacking the problem to help be a part of the solution of growing our number of kids in the top 300.
It's terrific. Well, I think we can end there. I want to thank you again for talking with me today. It's an interesting conversation about the financial challenges that the athletes face today. And certainly we want to continue to see success. I think we had a terrific showing at World Champs for the women at the very least, and want to continue to grow that. We didn't touch on it. I think the challenge, the runway that's required for males is longer, in terms than it is for women, and so I think it presents another interesting, or another twist to that same challenge, which is, how to fund that longer runway required for takeoff. But thank you again. I really appreciate your joining, and hopefully some folks who are listening, find your website, which remind me the address for World Cup Dreams Foundation.
WorldCupDreams.org.
Perfect, and make a contribution there, or attend the thing at Bonnie's in Aspen.
Yeah, or we have an event in Sun Valley during World Cup Finals too, which is going to be great. It's called Legends of the Fall Line, and so we have 12 legends attending, and we put a legend at each table, and to scratch the surface on some of those legends, we have Bodie Miller, Ted Ligety, Steve Nyman, Tommy Moe, Darren Rolfs, Franz Klammer, Klaus Heidegger, Franz Weber, Peekaboo Street, and so on. It's going to be a great event, super fun. So there's a lot of ways to support.
Terrific. Well, thanks again. Appreciate your time.
Shit, Craig. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode with Tommy Biesemeyer. I think it's clear from the conversation that the challenge of paying for athlete development isn't going away anytime soon. It is great that World Cup Dreams Foundation is a resource that can help U.S. alpine skiing succeed at the World Cup level. While we didn't talk about it during the episode, World Cup Dreams Foundation also supports cross-country skiers. And if you'd like to learn more or make a donation, please go to worldcupdreams.org. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please like and subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget to leave us a review if you're so inclined. Music by Eric Zolan from his album Calder's Universe, which is on Spotify.